I printed my resignation letter at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. After 15 years building Aldridge Manufacturing from a regional hardware supplier into a $200 million defense contractor, my father-in-law had just handed my modernization project to a 25-year-old MBA intern named Chad Foster. I'm Mac Thompson, 47 years old, and I'd been optimizing supply chain since before most people knew what that meant. Wednesday morning, William's voice carried down the hallway like he was announcing the second coming. Innovation comes from fresh perspectives, he was saying to whoever would listen in that executive conference room. All chest and performance, like he was pitching some revolutionary idea instead of what I knew was coming next. I kept walking past, didn't slow down, heard this song before. By Friday afternoon, I'd be walking out the door with my resignation in William's hands and a plan that would systematically dismantle everything he thought he owned. But I'm getting ahead of myself. See, William Aldridge wasn't just my boss, he was my father-in-law. And for 15 years, I'd been the guy keeping his family business from falling apart while he played CEO like it was some kind of hobby. Rebecca, my wife, she always said her dad meant well. Sure he did. Problem was, meaning well doesn't optimize logistics chains or negotiate supplier contracts at 2 a.m. when a shipment goes sideways. I built that place. Not literally, but everything that mattered. When I started there fresh out of the Navy, they were still running purchase orders through Excel and hoping for the best. Their biggest client was a regional hardware store chain, pulling maybe $50,000 monthly orders. 15 years later, we had defense contracts worth $200 million annually and supplied logistics support for military contractors across the Midwest. Know who made that happen? Not William. But family businesses have their own physics, and the first law seemed to be keep the son-in-law useful but invisible. Can't have him getting too comfortable, you know? Might start thinking he actually belonged there. The warning signs had been accumulating for weeks. William kept taking these golf meetings with his old buddy from the country club whose son Chad had just finished his MBA at Northwestern. Chad Foster, 25 years old, with a handshake like he was running for student government and theories about supply chain disruption that he'd obviously memorized from case studies. First time I met the kid, he asked me about our digital transformation roadmap. I showed him the integrated tracking system I'd built that monitored every component from raw material acquisition to finished product delivery, cut our lead times by 30%, and saved us $12 million last year alone. He nodded like he was humoring his grandfather's war stories. Impressive legacy system, he said. Legacy system, like I'd shown him a steam engine. Then came the board meeting where everything shifted. William had called it a strategic planning session, brought in catered sandwiches from that expensive place downtown, like he was trying to soften something. Never a good sign when William sprung for lunch that cost more than most people's daily wages. Last time we had catering was when he laid off half the quality control team and called it efficiency optimization. I walked into that conference room carrying my 5-year modernization plan. 25 pages of detailed analysis, supplier consolidation strategies, and a $50 million equipment upgrade that would position us as the primary logistics hub for defense contractors across the Great Lakes region. Took me 8 months to put together, working nights and weekends. Every number verified 3 times, every projection built on conservative assumptions, every risk factor analyzed and mitigated. Chad was already there, sitting 3 seats down from William like he'd been attending board meetings his entire life. Had his laptop open to what looked suspiciously like my presentation slides, except cleaner. Prettier fonts, better graphics, more buzzwords. Same fundamental content, different packaging, like putting racing stripes on a minivan and calling it a sports car. Gentlemen, William started, standing up with his coffee cup like he was about to deliver the Gettysburg Address. We're at a crossroads here at Aldridge Manufacturing. The defense industry is evolving rapidly. Our clients need partners who understand modern supply chain dynamics and can adapt to changing market conditions. I knew where this was headed. Seen this movie before, different actors, same predictable script. The future belongs to organizations that can blend institutional knowledge with innovative thinking, which is why I'm excited to announce that Chad will be leading our modernization initiative as Strategic Operations Director. The conference room went quiet. You know that kind of quiet where even the air conditioning seems to hold its breath. I looked around the table at faces I'd worked with for years. Half these guys had been collaborating with me for a decade. They knew who really ran operations, who solved the crises at midnight, who kept the production lines moving when suppliers failed or weather shut down transportation networks. But nobody said anything. Family businesses have their own gravity. Everyone orbits around the owner, no matter how eccentric or distant that orbit becomes. Chad stood up, cleared his throat with practiced confidence. I'm really honored by the opportunity to bring some fresh thinking to these challenges. I believe we can leverage synergistic approaches to optimize our operational framework while maintaining our commitment to excellence. Fresh thinking, synergistic approaches, operational framework, that's what my 15 years of experience had become. Stale thinking that needed to be optimized by someone who'd never run a production line or negotiated with a supplier having a crisis at 3 a.m. on Christmas Eve. I didn't say anything, just sat there, adjusted my watch, and smiled politely. "Congratulations on the decision," I said finally, using the same tone I'd used to acknowledge that someone had decided to paint their house an unfortunate color. William kept talking about leveraging core competencies and maximizing strategic advantages. Chad nodded along like he understood what any of it meant in practical terms. The whole time, I was calculating not revenge. Exactly, more like systematic risk assessment. Contingency planning for a scenario where the person running operations had no idea how operations actually worked. After the meeting, I walked back to my office like nothing had happened. Didn't slam anything, didn't make dramatic gestures. Just opened my files and started a methodical documentation process. Email threads with suppliers, contract modification histories, vendor contact information, emergency procurement protocols. Started copying everything to my personal drive. Not stealing, mind you. Just creating comprehensive backups of my own work product and professional relationships. That night, Rebecca Aldridge Thompson asked how the meeting went. I was standing in our kitchen, reheating leftover Chinese takeout, watching her grade math tests at the dining table. She taught high school algebra, still believed that hard work and correct answers mattered more than politics. Sweet, optimistic woman. Married me when I was a junior logistics coordinator with more ambition than common sense, back when her father still thought I might amount to something useful. "Your father's bringing in some new blood," I told her, stirring fried rice that had seen better days. She looked up from a student's geometry proof, pencil still in hand. "That's good, right? You're always saying you need more support." Support, sure, that's what 25 pages of strategic planning and 15 years of institutional knowledge represented. Support for someone who'd never managed anything more complex than a group project. "Yeah," I said, "should be educational." The next few weeks, I watched Chad try to quarterback my modernization project like he was learning to parallel park in downtown traffic. He scheduled meetings about meetings, sent emails requesting quick syncs for preliminary discussions about status updates. Kid was drowning in process and didn't even realize the water was rising above his head. "I think we need to align on our strategic roadmap before we dive into tactical implementation," he told me during one of his brainstorming sessions. Translation: he had no idea where to start. Meanwhile, I kept doing my actual job. Kept the production lines moving, kept suppliers delivering on schedule, kept defense contracts flowing smoothly. Business as usual, except now I had to copy Chad on every communication and explain why we did things the way we did them. "Why don't we just switch to the cheaper supplier in Malaysia for these components?" he asked during a supplier review meeting, pointing at cost projections like he'd discovered buried treasure. I pulled up the quality control reports from our current supplier in Toledo, showed him transportation cost analysis that included fuel surcharges, customs delays, and currency fluctuation risks. Walked him through contract clauses that tied our defense work to domestic sourcing requirements mandated by federal procurement regulations. "Oh," he said, blinking at the spreadsheets, "that's more complicated than I thought." "Complicated? Yeah, kid. Running a $200 million operation while maintaining security clearances and regulatory compliance tends to involve complications that don't appear in business school case studies." The breaking point came during a client visit that would define everything. North Star Defense, our biggest account, sent their procurement team for a quarterly operational review. These weren't golf course connections or family friends. These were former military officers who'd been coordinating supply chains through combat zones for 20 years. Colonel Henderson, their supply chain director, had managed logistics for 3 deployments and survived budget cuts that eliminated entire programs. They wanted comprehensive assessments of our production capabilities, detailed reviews of our supply chain security protocols, and realistic evaluations of our operational readiness for a potential $75 million expansion project. William decided Chad should lead the presentation. I sat in the back corner of the conference room, watching this kid try to explain operational logistics to people who'd coordinated supply drops under enemy fire. He had PowerPoint slides about end-to-end visibility and dynamic resource allocation. Professional terminology wrapped around theoretical frameworks that sounded impressive until someone asked practical questions about implementation details. "Walk us through your contingency protocols," Colonel Henderson said, leaning forward in his chair. "What happens when your primary supplier experiences a facility emergency?" Chad blinked, consulted his laptop screen, then looked back up. "Well, we'd assess the situation comprehensively, and develop alternative sourcing strategies. Henderson's expression didn't change, but I caught the slight tightening around his eyes. 20 years of military procurement experience, and he was listening to someone explain emergency response planning like it was a theoretical exercise. Specifically, Henderson continued, your backup supplier network, inventory buffers, transportation alternatives. How long from initial notification to restored production capacity? More blinking from Chad. More consulting of slides that contained buzzwords instead of operational details. Henderson looked over at me. We'd worked together through a genuine crisis 5 years earlier when flooding shut down our main component supplier for 3 weeks. I'd activated alternate sources within 48 hours, maintained production schedules, and delivered everything on time while coordinating with emergency management agencies and insurance adjusters. Mac, Henderson said quietly.
Walk us through the redundancy protocols. I glanced at William. He nodded slightly. Damage control time?
I stood up and explained our supplier network diversification strategy, emergency procurement procedures, inventory buffer calculations, and transportation contingency planning. Spoke for maybe 12 minutes, covering operational details that Chad should have memorized if he'd spent a weekend reading the standard operating procedures instead of creating slide presentations about strategic visioning. When I finished, Henderson nodded once. That's what we need to hear. North Star requires operational partners who can execute under pressure, not strategic consultants who theorize about best practices. After they left, William pulled me aside in the hallway. His face had that slightly gray tinge that appeared whenever major contracts were at risk. Good recovery in there, he said. Recovery, like I was a backup quarterback instead of the person who'd built the system they were evaluating. Chad's still learning the ropes, William added, adjusting his tie with nervous fingers. Yeah, I thought. Question is whether we can afford his education while managing $200 million in active contracts. That weekend, I got an unexpected call from Colonel Henderson. Personal call, not business. Mac, got a minute? Want to run something by you? Sure, Colonel. What's on your mind? I was in my garage organizing tools that hadn't been properly sorted since we'd moved into this house 3 years ago. Had my phone on speaker while I categorized socket wrenches by size and condition. North Star's expanding our Midwest operations significantly. Looking for a primary logistics partner, independent firm, not tied to any single manufacturer. Someone who understands both operational excellence and regulatory requirements. Interested in exploring some opportunities, I stopped sorting and picked up the phone. What kind of opportunities? The kind that would let you build something from scratch. Your standards, your processes, your team. We've got 4 other major defense contractors ready to commit. Looking at potentially $250 million in combined contracts over 5 years, assuming we can find the right operational leadership. I set down my socket wrench and walked outside to the driveway. Late afternoon sun, neighbors mowing lawns, normal suburban Saturday activities continuing around a conversation that might change everything. That's a serious commitment, Colonel. Serious opportunity for serious people. We need operational expertise, not strategic consulting. Think about it, but don't think too long. Market conditions won't wait for perfect timing. That night, I sat in my home office looking at 15 years worth of performance reviews, cost savings reports, and client testimonials. Had a manila folder thick as a phone book documenting every process improvement, every supplier relationship built from scratch, every crisis managed at ungodly hours. My work product, my professional reputation, my industry relationships, all of it portable. Rebecca found me there around 11 p.m., brought coffee in the mug our daughter had made in middle school pottery class. You're up late, she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. Just reviewing some career decisions. She frowned at the paperwork spread across my desk. This about Chad taking over the modernization project. Smart woman, my wife. Sees things others prefer to ignore, partly. Dad means well, Mac. He's just trying to prepare the company for the future. I looked up from a supplier contract I'd negotiated 3 years ago, saved the company $3 million annually through volume commitments and quality guarantees. What if the future he's preparing for doesn't include me? What do you mean your father's made his choice? He wants fresh thinking, innovative approaches, strategic transformation. Can't argue with that philosophy. Question is, where does that leave someone with legacy experience? She leaned forward, concerned now. You're being dramatic. Dad depends on you. The whole company depends on you. Companies depend on systems, Rebecca. People become replaceable when someone decides their experience is outdated. I didn't mention Henderson's call yet. Some decisions require individual processing before they become family discussions. Monday morning, I typed my resignation letter. One page, professional format, effective immediately, no grievances, no detailed explanations, no emotional language. Just a simple notification that I was pursuing other opportunities and would transition responsibilities as efficiently as possible. I printed it on company letterhead, signed it with the pen Rebecca had given me for our 10th anniversary, and put it in a clean white envelope with William's name written clearly across the front. Walking into William's office felt like approaching a routine business meeting. He was on the phone with someone about quarterly projections, gesturing with a coffee cup while reviewing spreadsheets on his computer monitor. I waited by the door until he finished his conversation about market penetration and competitive positioning. "Mac, come in. What can I do for you this morning?" I handed him the envelope without ceremony, professional courtesy, nothing more. He opened it with the distracted efficiency of someone expecting routine paperwork, read it once quickly, then looked up at me with genuine confusion. Read it again more slowly, as if different words might appear on second examination. "You're joking, right?" His voice carried that tone people use when reality contradicts their expectations. "No, sir. Standard 2 weeks notice, effective as of today." His face cycled through several expressions before settling on something between disbelief and panic. "This is about Chad, isn't it?" "Look, I know there's been an adjustment period, but we can work through any concerns. It's not about Chad," I said calmly. "It's about professional opportunities." "What opportunities, Mac? We've got active contracts, projects in development, client relationships to maintain. You can't just walk away from 15 years of investment." "I can and I am. Chad's your strategic operations director now. Time for him to direct operations strategically." William stood up abruptly, started pacing the space behind his mahogany desk. "This is insane. You're part of this family, Mac. This company represents your legacy too." I adjusted my sleeve cuffs, checked my watch with practiced calm. My legacy is my work product and my professional relationships. Those assets transfer with me. What's that supposed to mean? Means Chad's about to get an accelerated education in practical operations management, or you're going to have some challenging conversations with clients who value experience over innovation. I turned toward the door, ready to begin my final 2 weeks. "Mac, wait, let's discuss this rationally. What would it take to reconsider this decision?" "Nothing, William. The decision's been made. I'll transfer what I can over the next 2 weeks, but some relationships and knowledge can't be documented in training manuals." 2 weeks later, I cleaned out my office methodically. No dramatic gestures, no farewell speeches, just boxed up 15 years of accumulated work materials and walked out to the parking lot where Rebecca was waiting beside my truck. "You sure about this path?" she asked, watching me load boxes into the truck bed. "More certain than I've been about any decision in years. What happens now?" Now we discover if I was right about building something that survives independently. The consequences began appearing faster than anyone anticipated. 3 days after my departure, North Star called Aldridge Manufacturing to discuss expanding the partnership. Chad took the meeting confidently, armed with presentation slides about leveraging synergistic opportunities. According to my source in procurement, the conversation lasted approximately 8 minutes before Henderson asked where I was. "Mac Thompson is no longer with our organization," Chad apparently explained, "but I'm fully prepared to continue managing our strategic relationship." Henderson's response was direct. "Then North Star is no longer interested in expanding our partnership." 2 weeks after that, Consolidated Defense pulled their $50 million maintenance contract, cited changes in operational leadership as grounds for contract review, said they preferred working directly with their logistics coordinator rather than through intermediary management layers. 1 month later, Midwest Components terminated their exclusive supplier agreement. Reported concerns about continuity of service quality following recent organizational changes. I didn't orchestrate any of these developments. Didn't make phone calls or plant seeds of doubt, just allowed industry relationships to follow their natural progression. Defense contractors are fundamentally conservative organizations. They build partnerships with individuals they trust based on demonstrated competence, not with corporate entities based on marketing presentations. Meanwhile, I was establishing Thompson Logistics Solutions. Filed incorporation paperwork, leased office space in a modern building near the airport, hired 4 former Aldridge employees who decided their futures lay elsewhere when they heard about my new venture. Not recruiting, exactly. Just happened to mention my plans when people approached me with questions about severance packages and unemployment benefits. Within 4 months, I had 8 employees and a $180 million in committed contracts. North Star, Consolidated Defense, Midwest Components, plus 3 new clients who'd heard about our capabilities through industry channels and professional recommendations. Aldridge Manufacturing, meanwhile, was hemorrhaging both revenue and reputation. Lost 45% of their defense business within 10 months. Chad lasted exactly 7 months before William quietly reassigned him to strategic planning and hired an operations director from outside the company. Cost them twice my former salary, plus relocation expenses, signing bonus, and 6 months of consulting fees to understand systems I'd built from scratch. The new guy lasted 4 months before he resigned, citing insurmountable operational challenges and inadequate institutional knowledge transfer. Apparently, running complex defense logistics required more than PowerPoint presentations and strategic frameworks. During this period, Thomson Logistics Solutions was expanding steadily, added 12 more employees, most of them experienced manufacturing and logistics professionals who understood that operational excellence comes from systematic execution, not innovative theories. Former military personnel, veterans from other manufacturing companies, people who knew the difference between planning and performing. The industry recognition started building quietly. Word spreads fast in defense contracting circles when someone delivers consistent results while competitors struggle with basic operations. Procurement officers talk to each other, compare notes about reliable partners versus problematic relationships. 6 months after leaving Aldridge, I received an invitation to speak at the Midwest Manufacturing Association conference about supply chain resilience in defense contracting. Professional recognition from industry peers, the kind that matters more than internal company politics. 9 months later came the National Manufacturing Association dinner. Industry awards ceremony, networking event, all the ritual components of professional acknowledgement. I was seated at the head table as recipient of the Operational Excellence Award for innovative approaches to logistics coordination under challenging conditions. William was at table 15, near the back section where sponsors and smaller companies usually sit. Aldridge Manufacturing had dropped from platinum sponsor level to basic membership after losing most of their major contracts. When they announced Thomson Logistics Solutions' selection as primary contractor for the new $250 million Great Lakes Defense Initiative, I caught William's eye across the room. No satisfaction, no vindication, just professional acknowledgement between two men who'd built entirely different approaches to the same business challenges. He nodded once. I nodded back. Rebecca squeezed my hand under the table. Think he understands now what he lost. I considered the question while applause continued around us. Don't think it matters anymore. After dinner, William approached me at the bar where I was finishing a conversation with Colonel Henderson about expansion possibilities. We stood there for a moment, surrounded by industry noise, people discussing contracts and market conditions, and regulatory changes. Hell of a thing you built, Mac, William said finally. Thanks. Any advice for someone who should have recognized talent when he had it? I finished my drink, set the glass down carefully, find competent people and trust them to do their jobs. Age doesn't determine ability. Credentials don't guarantee performance. Results are the only measurement that matters in this business. He nodded slowly, looking older than I remembered. Wish I'd understood that principle 15 years ago would have prevented considerable complications for both of us. These days, Thomson Logistics Solutions coordinates operations for 18 defense contractors across the Midwest and expanding into the Southeast region. We employ 52 people, most of them experienced professionals who understand that excellence isn't about innovation for its own sake. It's about reliable execution of proven processes. Chad Foster incidentally works for a management consulting firm now, helps companies develop strategic transformation roadmaps and organizational change initiatives. Good fit for someone who prefers theoretical frameworks to practical implementation. Everyone eventually finds their appropriate role. William retired 8 months ago, sold Aldridge Manufacturing to a private equity firm that immediately laid off 60% of the workforce, moved production to lower-cost facilities overseas, and eliminated most of the specialized capabilities that had taken decades to develop. 30-year family business, dissolved in 14 months of financial restructuring. Sometimes people ask if I feel bad about how things developed. Honest answer? No. I built something sustainable that employs skilled people and serves clients who value competence over connections. That's sufficient legacy for anyone. The most effective revenge isn't getting even with people who wronged you. It's building something better and letting the results demonstrate your actual value. Success speaks louder than any argument you could make about fairness or recognition. Professional relationships matter more than family politics. Industry reputation matters more than internal company status. Competence matters more than credentials or connections. These principles apply whether you're managing supply chains, running sales operations, or coordinating any business function that requires actual results rather than impressive presentations. When someone shows you that they don't value your contributions, believe them the first time. Don't wait for additional evidence. Don't hope they'll eventually recognize your worth. Make your own opportunities based on what you can control rather than hoping others will change their assessment of your capabilities. You already know if you're the person keeping things running while someone else takes credit. You already know if your experience is being dismissed in favor of newer approaches that sound innovative but lack practical foundation. You already know if your organization values image over substance, Politics over performance, connections over competence. The question isn't whether you deserve better recognition. The question is what you're going to do with that knowledge. You can stay and hope things improve, or you can take your skills somewhere they'll be properly valued. Your expertise has value in the marketplace. Your relationships have currency with people who understand quality work. Your reputation among peers who actually do the work matters more than your status in organizations that don't appreciate what you bring. Don't waste years waiting for appreciation that's never coming. Build something that demonstrates your actual worth. Let your results speak for themselves. The best vindication isn't convincing people they were wrong about you. It's proving they can't succeed without what you bring to the table. That's not revenge. That's just business.